Zephyr stood on the glassed plains, observing the aftermath of the Null Cannon bombardment. The battle was long finished by the time she arrived, but the residual heat remained. 1,000 souls atomized and sealed into the planet's surface in a matter of seconds. A tragedy, yes, but also more than that. In the centre of the plain stood a black iron pillar. By all accounts, it was here before the battle, even before the colony, and it remained after, still monolithic and cold. Yes, cold was the right word on that plane of flash-fired glass. All soulbinders in the sector must have sensed it. She was simply the closest. As Zephyr approached, her awareness of the change within the black iron pillar grew stronger. 1,000 souls channeled into it, drawn to it like a lightning rod, and twisted into something beyond recognition. Taking a deep breath, Zephyr reached out toward the pillar and touched it. Even through her environmental suit, she felt the change in temperature. The presence within noticed her, and Zephyr braced for the battle to come. A battle that could not be won with null cannons. Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone, am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. Did you all enjoy this week's Tale from the Drift? Well, that great piece of flash fiction was submitted by Steve Morrison of the Errant Adventures podcast. And I assume that most people watching this will have heard of Steve or Errant Adventures, but if you haven't, Errant Adventures is the absolute gold standard for Ironsworn podcasts. Now, he's about to wrap up his first season, which has been running for the better part of the last year, I think, and trust me when I say it is an absolutely fantastic ride. And if you like this show, if you like what I do, then there's every chance you'll love Steve's show too. I'll put a link to where you can find it in the description below. Submissions for Tales from the Drift are open as always, so if you want to roll on the oracles and see what you can come up with, then please get in touch with the details that are on the screen now. So, we move on to session 10. 10 whole sessions. Frankly, I can't believe that Archer has managed to survive this long, to be honest. But here we are. Last time out, Archer joined the Kid in a clandestine mission to sabotage the power facility known as the Grid. They did so, I would say relatively successfully. But as they escaped, they were chased across the moon's surface by mercenaries in little dune buggies. A shootout ensued, and the mercenaries were defeated, but not before their passenger, who was in on the sabotage at the Grid with them, was badly injured. And as the trio found safe passage across the bridge, they arrived to find themselves summoned to face someone important. And that someone appears to be the father of our now dead companion. If you want to follow along with us each week, then please do like this video, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you won't miss a single thing. Right, shall we press on? Let's. So we find ourselves in this room, and the person we're with is clearly the person who the Kid thinks is going to help me, who the Kid thinks will give me more details about Blake Sutton's whereabouts. She said that if I helped her sabotage the Grid, then this would help gain the trust of this person, and they'd help me on my quest to reach Paxton Hold and hand over the databank that I'm still carrying right to this moment in my little satchel. And I think we worked out that the person that I would need to find, the person who now stands at the end of this table opposite us, was the person who has been leading this strike on the moon of Rust. This man is the person in charge on this side of the crevasse. And we have just arrived back with his son, who has been killed during our escape. Now, firstly, I want to name this person right off the bat. So let's roll up some names. 86 is Severinus. 28 is Kane. Severinus Kane. Now that is a name and a half. So should we give him a couple of descriptors real quick, see what he's like? So 38 is graceful, and 86 is visibly disabled. Okay, so I think what I'm going to say is the graceful part of that is that maybe despite the fact that he has his son laying dead in front of him, he has not yet kind of gotten angry or outwardly emotional. He is kind of dignified in the face of this tragedy, on the surface anyway. I suppose if he's the leader over here, then these are qualities that might serve him well. So he's kind of keeping it together. And visibly disabled, I think that maybe as he stands over the body of his son, I think he reaches his hand out to kind of gently brush a strand of hair away from his face, and we can see that his hand, or in fact actually let's say both hands, are augmented replacements. We have riggers in this world is what they're called. They'll kind of like strap you on a kind of bionic limb if you need it, sometimes with varying results. But so he has 2 replacement limbs from the elbow down, and they don't look natural, as in like they're not kind of like, they don't have skin over the top, and they wouldn't pass for real hands and arms, but they are dexterous, sophisticated replacements. And he is kind of tenderly touching his son's face, and as he looks down at his son, he repeats the question that he asked us last week, or minutes ago in the fiction. He says, "Which one of you would care to explain why my son is dead?" And I think the kid, she kind of looks down awkwardly, and she takes a moment before she says, "It's my fault. I needed help. He volunteered. And now he's dead." And I think this whole time, Severinus hasn't looked up. He's still looking down at his boy. And he says, "And who's this?" The kid looks at Archer, and she says, "He helped us too. He helped us bring down the grid. If it wasn't for him, you'd both be dead." The kid looks down kind of sheepishly, and I think Archer can tell she's a bit out of her depth here. "What do you want?" And Severinus looks up for the first time, kind of fixing Archer with this hard stare. He says, "You're not from here. You're clearly not a merc. So forgive me if I question your altruism." And Archer and the kid kind of share a look between them. And Archer says, "I was helping the kid to get to you. Well, here I am. I need to get to you to get to Blake Sutton. You don't look like a bounty hunter." I get that a lot. "I trust him. I vouch for him." And Severinus turns to her. She says, "I do, I trust him." And then he looks back down again at his son's body, and the kid continues, He helped us. He helped us take down the grid." And Severinus bows his head and says, "And this is what it cost." The kid says, "I'm sorry." And Severinus kind of slumps down into the chair at the head of the table, gives out a deep sigh and says, "Every struggle demands sacrifice." And he kind of motions at all those banners that we said were hanging on the walls in the hall. And he says, "These banners commemorate the struggle and sacrifice of our forebears. I was born into this. My son was born into this. He didn't have a choice. None of us do. But he did choose to fight back. My beautiful boy." And he places his hands over the boy's heart, and he has a moment, just this kind of quiet, silent moment of grief. Intense, internalized grief. And our struggle continues ever on. Our cause has ultimately been furthered thanks in part to your intervention, and that won't be forgotten. But given the price we have already paid, I do not think I can help you. And Archer kind of nods softly, sympathetically. He can feel the loss. He moves closer, and he lowers his voice and says, I need to reach Blake Sutton. I have to reach her before anyone else does. I have to deliver something that is bigger than any struggle. What I have in my possession could end all this. The clans, the war, everything. And Severinus looks up at him. And Archer says, but I need help. So I think I'm asking a lot of a bereaved man at a very raw time. So this is going to have to be a roll. And this is going to be a compel here. And it's going to be plus heart, which is not Archer's strong point. But we are maxed out on momentum, despite what I said last episode. Managed to catch an error there. And that could very well come into play. So, right, let's compel plus heart. That's a weak hit. So I feel like I don't want to complicate the narrative much further, because otherwise this story is going to kind of snowball and I'm going to struggle to stay true to all the threads of this story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn my momentum of 10 and make this a strong hit so that it resets. So back down to 2. So in the case of a strong hit on compel, they do what you want or agree to your conditions, and I get a momentum right back, so back up to 3. So, okay. So, I think Severinus kind of hears what Archer has said and kind of quietly nods, and I think he's tired. I think he's lost so much already. This is, kind of built on decades and decades of loss and struggle. And anything that might expedite any kind of resolution or might strike a blow against the clans is ultimately something worth assisting with. And he says, whatever I can do. And Archer can see the loss in his eyes, and he kind of feels that pain. He knows that pain. And he says, I am truly sorry. And Severinus believes him. He believes Archer. And I think Archer's gained his trust, along with some valuable information. So I'm going to say that this is a milestone reached, because I think we've gained valuable insight on our quest here. So let's blow the dust off this. We haven't made any progress on this for a while. Wow, so that's going to be 2 progress currently out of 10. That is slow going. So this could be a while. So let's say that Severinus calls someone in and kind of briefly confers with them, and a few minutes later they come back and they kind of like move over to Archer and hand him a little pen drive type thing. And let's say that that's got a bit more information about where Paxton Hold is. And it's not a map straight there. That would be way too easy. It's just some additional detail that will fill in some blanks, which is a big improvement because all we have is blanks currently. We've just been flying in a vague direction and hoping for the best. So it's handed to Archer, and Severinus moves over to him and kind of clasps his augmented hands around Archer's and says, "Make it count." And Archer says, "I'll try." And Severinus lets his hands go and turns towards the kid and says, "Get him where he needs to go." And she nods in agreement, and they head out. They work their way back through those alleyways and cut-throughs, and they find themselves back at the underground room where the smugglers' tubes were, and the same operator lets them in after the kid kind of bangs the same knock on the outside, and they move into the room, and Archer stands next to the open hatch, ready to climb in. And this is where he needs to go. And he stops and he looks back at the kid, and the kid looks back at him, and they've got their masks and their respirators on, and so communication isn't all that clear, but Archer says, "Try and stay out of trouble, kid." And the kid says, "You too. It seems to like you." Kind of Barlow laughs to himself, and he kind of waves goodbye. She returns the gesture, and then he gets in the tube. He climbs up and onto the sled, and then bangs the inside of the hatch to say he's good to go. And then the mechanical grinding starts up, and he begins his journey back across the crevasse. And instantly it hits him. He's on his own again. That familiar feeling that he's lived with for so long is back. But that's just the way it has to be. So I'm going to say that once we're across, the journey back to the spaceport is fairly straightforward, because they pulled off the sabotage at the grid, and they were kind of in disguise anyway. They were in like nondescript work gear, so identifying them won't be so easy if they kind of blend in with the crowd. Although, actually, that said, that's wrong, isn't it? Because they fought a security guard who confronted them, and also the staff inside the power regulator, if they survived the blast, all saw their faces. So maybe this won't be so straightforward after all. So, okay, I think the assumption will be, amongst whatever authority there is, I think we said there was no real kind of police or anything. I think the assumption will be is that the attack on the grid would have been carried out by the strikers, other than people who have come from off-world. So I think that's where any focus will be. So maybe as Archer is riding the metro back through the plants and towards the spaceport, maybe there's like some kind of aggressive searches being kind of carried out on the platforms by the mercs. They're kind of shaking people down and kind of grilling them and asking for ID and stuff, and kind of anyone matching vague descriptions. But I think they're looking for 3 people, not 1. And I think that Archer is kind of using this to get to the spaceport unhindered, unopposed, and managing to kind of just slip through any kind of stops that there would be. So I think it's a fair assumption to say there's a lot more security about, but, you know, there's more mercenaries, but maybe it's not focused on individuals. So, Archer is back at the spaceport. Do we need to do anything before we move on? Now, looking at our tracks, our supply is on the low side. Should we try and bolster our resources? How would we do that narratively? I think when we were down on Damu, on the Jungle World, there were lots of scrapped ships, weren't there, that were kind of lying around, and we scavenged them for parts. So that's very much our strong point. Shall we see if there's anything appropriate for us in this spaceport? We did say that it was more upscale than the one in Redemption, but that's not to say that we can't find something we need. So I don't think this is gathering information, is it? Is it secure an advantage? Maybe. No, maybe it is gather information. And maybe the information I'm looking for is maybe like where more specifically might Archer find some scrap that he can scavenge, because I think unlike Redemption Spaceport, there's not just piles of it lying around. So yeah, okay, gather information plus wits. Okay, weak hit. So the information provides new insight but complicates your quest. Take +1 momentum. So our momentum is up to 4. Okay, so let's just say that I have moved over to like a public access terminal to try and find out if there is some kind of repository for wrecks and maybe disused industrial scrap. And I think that Archer finds the information out fairly easily, but something else complicates things. Now, what could that be? I think that maybe as he logs off the terminal and closes the image of the schematic down, and before he kind of sets off in search, he's kind of stopped in his tracks by the public information images. Do you remember when we were on Concord and Archer was trying to procure the services of the Astrolabe, and that's where he learnt about Blake Sutton's bounty and who she was? I think that, when you use a public terminal, when you've stopped using it for what you're using it, it reverts back to kind of like, playing these kind of adverts and announcements in a loop. And I think that, there's the usual information on this terminal. There's, bounties, mining claims, stuff like that. And then there's something else. And I think that something is some really grainy stills from security footage. And those stills depict Archer and the kid fighting very ungainly with the guard in the grid. There's not enough detail to make out a face, and it is kind of black and white footage. It's, like I say, very low quality, but it's him, definitely. And we've learnt that our complication here is that there's essentially an APB out on Archer and the kid. And he needs to get out of here quickly. I think he kind of also has that brief moment of like guilt leaving the kid here, because I think he would feel that because she did not leave him at the grid when she could have. And I think now kind of Archer has that kind of anxiety in his chest and kind of creeping back, and he doesn't really understand why, because he's only known her like a day and a bit. But like, there was a connection there, and even though she could easily have got him killed several times, there is that connection, and he does feel something like guilt. But he has to leave. He just has to, because there are things at play here that are bigger than this. They're bigger than the kind of labor dispute on this moon in this kind of like industrial backwater, and he needs to get out of here. He has to get moving again. And I think that's his reasoning. And honestly, he probably does not believe that for a second. Not one bit. But he's got to keep moving. He's got to go. So I think he checks around. And whilst there is plenty of extra muscle around, there's no one guarding the Eclipse. There's no one guarding his ship. And, there doesn't seem to be many people checking travelers in and out of the spaceport. I think most of the security that he has seen to this point has been on that metro looking for workers or people dressed as workers, which reminds me, it's probably time that he got rid of that worker garb, retcon that a little bit, because now he will look out of place wearing that in these surroundings. Because workers on Rust, this moon, they're not kind of socially mobile enough to just get on their own ship and fly away. So he's back in his normal gear, and he's heading across the spaceport to the Eclipse. And up above, through the hexagonal opening, he can see those huge crystal asteroids kind of tumbling over slowly in the distance, and the clouds of that crystal mist enveloping them. And as he approaches his ship, he checks around one more time to see if anyone's looking at him, and then he quickly boards and closes the ramp behind him. And he finds Griff snoozing away in the cockpit where we left him last, and he doesn't even like beep a welcome to Archer as he enters. And he has a quick look around, and everything's where he left it. There's nothing out of place. It's all undisturbed, familiar. And he gets into the pilot seat, and he wakes up Griff. Yeah, we're leaving. Well, we know where we're going now. Well, not exactly where we're going. Well, it's what we've got. Let's just go, shall we? And the Eclipse rises up, and then it pulls up and out of the spaceport and away, leaving the red moon of Rust ringed by the crystal asteroids behind them. Archer plugs that pen drive that Severinus gave him into the console and punches the E-drive. And the black star field ahead of them, beyond the desert planet that they've been orbiting, turns red and purple, and they jump into the drift. So you were just going to leave without me, huh? And Archer spins round to see the kid stood in the cockpit. Because of course she was going to stow away on the Eclipse. Of course she was. Are you fucking nuts? We rolled a weak hit on our connection move last week. You think I'm just going to forget about that shit? No, of course not. Here she is. Of course she's here. And Archer looks at her. And that anxiety that was gripping him, that was making his chest tighter, it begins to lessen. And he's now back at a base level of Archer Barlow anxiety. It's kind of standard level that he has in his system every day, just a regular amount of worry. And he says, I wasn't going to. And the kid says, it's okay. You don't owe me anything. We're square. This is going to be rough, kid. There's some real bad people after what I've got. It sounds like you need the help. My name is Luna Zhong. Luna. That's close enough. And I think as touching as this scene is, we're going to develop our relationship, because I think this counts as sharing a profound moment. So let's just mark progress on that now. So we're up to 2 on our relationship with Luna. And I think Luna stops and she takes a minute to look at the reds and the purples and the oranges of the drift through the cockpit window. She's transfixed by it, because she's never been in the drift before. She's probably never been off Rust before. And she says, it's beautiful. And Archer says, don't stare too hard, kid. You won't like it when it stares back. So it's true what they say about the drift. It's haunted. Keep looking if you want to find out. And Archer starts tapping away at the console, kind of plotting some space data or whatnot into the central computer. And I guess now's as good a time as any to resume our expedition to try and find Paxton Hold. So we've been given a bit more information about where to find Blake Sutton, and how I'm going to represent that mechanically, because it's not a map of direct instructions or directions, is I'm going to downgrade the rank of this expedition from formidable to dangerous. Now, I'm not 100% sure that this is in the rules, but frankly, I'm having too much fun to care. So, what are you going to do? This is my show, and I can do what I want, and I'm drunk on power. No one can stop me. So I'm going to downgrade this expedition from formidable to dangerous. And good God, we're only on 3 progress on this expedition too, my word. In fact, that whole escapade on Rust, with the strike, with the kid, with the grid, with the whole thing, basically the entirety of the last 2 episodes, that was just the result of a weak hit on the move Explore a Waypoint 3 episodes ago. So that's how quickly a weak hit can spiral out of control. So yeah, that's like a third of the content produced for this show so far has been spent exploring this weak hit. So, okay, anyway, let's make this move. We are going to undertake an expedition, and for once we didn't flee or have to bail quickly. So we can do this cautiously. We've got a little more information on where we're going. So I think this counts as rolling plus wits. So let's roll it up. Ooh, a strong hit with a match, you say? Interesting. What does it say about a match? Nothing. It says when you explore a waypoint and you roll a match, that's when you make a discovery. So not on a not on a expedition roll. So that's disappointing, but we'll bank that match for a second and we'll kind of figure out how to use it. So first we'll mark progress on our expedition, and now it's dangerous. That takes us up to 5 progress, so we're flying through this expedition now. So let's envision what we find as we drop out of the drift. Let's roll on the Space Sighting Oracle. Okay, 28 is a planet. And we rolled a match, so I think it's fair to say we can roll on the Spaceborne Opportunity Oracle too. In fact, it actually says at the bottom here, you can, if you roll a match on expeditions, you can roll on this opportunity table. So, okay. So what favourable situation do we encounter? Let's roll. 31 is derelict, ripe for the picking. Interesting. So, the eclipse rattles and shakes as we prepare to drop out of the drift. And Luna doesn't quite know how to act. She's clinging on to things. She's trying to steady herself, and she looks apprehensive. I think scared is fair. This is all new to her. This is a whole new world. And then the shuddering suddenly stops as they emerge into a bluey black starfield, and ahead of them is a planet. And for a planet like this, its orbit will make a perfect place to power down and charge the E-drive, if it's safe to do so. So let's find out what kind of planet it is. 32. 32 is a grave world. So a grave world says, so once a thriving world, now a grim monument to a fallen civilization. Okay. Interesting. And there's a derelict ripe for the picking. What kind of derelict? So I'll roll on the oracle here. It'll tell me whether it's a settlement or a ship or whatever. So 8, a derelict starship. I think we can probably expand on that. There is a starship oracle, so let's roll on that. So 44 is an outbounder, which is a remote survey or research starship. That is perfect for us, I guess, especially if we need to resupply, which we do. So there's this remote survey vessel, and it's out here orbiting this grave world, this abandoned, lifeless planet. Well, it might be lifeless. Who knows? I don't want to speculate, because we know what happens when I go exploring around. So let's roll up a bit more detail. So, okay. What can we see from space of this planet? So 85 is vast wastelands. So yeah, the whole planet is just this one unbroken expanse of grey brown earth, and it doesn't seem to be a lot of like variation of color or relief. It's just a wasteland. And what else? Should we roll again? Let's roll again. Okay, 4 is broken moon. A broken moon. So I think maybe hanging, kind of suspended in the orbit of this grey brown wasteland planet, is this kind of loose cluster of rock that was probably a moon at some point, but it's been kind of shattered into pieces by an asteroid or something else. But like, it hasn't been kind of like scattered everywhere. It is just kind of hanging loosely together, suspended together in this kind of clump. And yeah, it kind of looks like it's a moon broken into many, many pieces, and it's just about keeping its rough kind of like spherical shape. So that's kind of cool and atmospheric. So what's this research ship like? I think the Eclipse is a survey ship, but I think this is much bigger. I think that maybe this is a ship that's kind of big enough to launch other ships out of. I think this is kind of maybe one that serves as a temporary station that would come to, planets like this, planets that aren't particularly safe, that they could send people down to the surface that could return safely back and forth like that. So it couldn't stay in orbit forever and be a kind of a settlement like a space station like Concorde is, for example, but it could do the job, kind of like an aircraft carrier type deal. This kind of survey station ship that is, would go to a planet and send down kind of like smaller ships to do the work. And yeah, so let's let's roll on the first look and see what that's saying about this ship. 79. 79 says, sending signal or message. Okay, so what kind of message? Like, distress signal? Is that too obvious? Is a distress signal too obvious? I think a distress signal is too obvious. We're not going to go with that, but maybe like a beacon or something. I don't know what. I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Okay, hang on. I've got an idea for what this is. So the screen on Archer's console pings instantly as they drop out of the drift, and there's this message. And after they've kind of taken in the sight of what they can see, Archer looks at this message, and it's just all text. There's no picture, it's just text. And as he looks at it, he stares at it and kind of continues to stare, as if like by staring harder at it, it's going to in some way make more sense to him, because it doesn't make sense. This can't make sense, what it says. And he even kind of like bangs the monitor with his hand, but even with that, the message doesn't change. And Luna leans over to look. She reads it out loud. She says, enact recovery protocol. Asset retrieval activated. The Griffin Institute. And then she says, what's the Griffin Institute? I've seen that name. Where have I seen that name? And Archer motions to the panel above the console, which has property of the Griffin Institute stenciled on it. And she notices that and notices the same thing stenciled on everything, on all the equipment. She looks over at Griff and notices that there's an I and an N rubbed off from the writing on his flank. And she says, is this good or bad? And Archer says, either way, we're boarding that ship. Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the bell icon to be notified next time there is a video out. Until next time, it is farewell and safe passage.